Okay, well, I would love to start by asking you where you grew up.
Oh my gosh. So I grew up in Boston, very close to Salem witch trials. So it's probably an apt place for a horror author
Yeah.
to grow up. So I spent most of my life in New England. I lived in Atlanta for a little bit, down south, and then I moved to Korea for a bit. Now I'm back in Boston.
Nice. Are you Korean?
No, that would be wonderful because I love their food. But no, I'm Chinese and Japanese and
Oh, come
white.
on. Well, Chinese food is my
It's
wife's half,
also good.
yeah,
Yeah,
well, my
you
wife's
can't go
half
wrong.
Chinese, and we're thinking of going there this year. And I
Oh,
went
fun.
I went there just before COVID, and I thought it was insanely cool. I loved China. I thought it was
Oh,
so
that's awesome. I've actually never been, so
yeah,
that's amazing.
lots of people. I guess. Do you mind me asking why you haven't been?
The opportunity has really just never presented itself to me. Like, I unfortunately don't have any family there
Yeah,
anymore. So I don't know if I'd even know where to begin, honestly. And I've
yeah,
heard that it's getting harder and harder to visit if you don't like know someone there just because
yeah.
of the way you pay for things and everything is not the same way it happens in America. So someday I would like to go.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so you're half Chinese, half Japanese, right?
I'm a
Is that what
quarter
you said?
Chinese, a quarter Japanese, and then half white, Irish, general pale European.
All right, so
So
you're a world you're a person of the world. That's
I
great.
sure am.
Yeah, yeah. So what was it like growing up in even though you moved to Korea, what was it like growing up in America, you know?
I really enjoyed growing up in Boston. I think something I didn't fully appreciate until I got older was just how diverse the city
Mhm.
is and how I was exposed to so many different cultures. Like in my high school, there's a very significant population of Vietnamese, Brazilian, and Haitian immigrants.
Yeah.
So I just grew up exposed to so many different people. Unfortunately, there were not a ton of Chinese people around
Yeah.
me. So growing up, I was kind of, one of the Asian kids, which was
Yeah.
very fun when I then went to college, where there was a huge percentage of international students
Yeah.
from Korea and China, and suddenly I was not really one of the Asians. And then, of course, in Korea, that all goes out the window. Everything's different. But Boston itself, I think, is a wonderful place to grow up. Just the schools are so great. Everything is. I won't say everything. A lot of people are very liberal. I think more
Yeah.
so than if I were in other places in the country. So that's something I certainly appreciate now that I've lived in other parts of
Mm.
the world and I've come back here.
Were you brought up with a kind of liberal view of the world?
Yes, I would say so. It's funny because my dad says that he was conservative when he met my mom,
Oh
and
yeah.
then what he says is he actually started researching a lot of the things that
Yeah.
conservative people were saying, and he realized, oh, a lot of this isn't true, and now
Did
he's
she
very
point out
liberal now.
did she point it out to him though? Was she the catalyst, do you think?
I don't think so. I think he
Okay.
just took it upon himself. So
Well,
I
that's
am very
good.
fortunate. I think it would be much harder to have a relationship with my parents if we were always on opposite ends of the spectrum.
No, but I guess it is pretty rare for someone with conservative values to start questioning, themselves.
Yeah.
I mean,
Oh,
I don't know.
absolutely.
Maybe that's a generalization, but it seems rare because
Yeah.
there's so much certainty for me associated with the right and the conservatism. Like,
Mhm.
I feel like the left wing and more liberal, it's all about asking questions. It's all
Mhm.
about going like, is this right? Am I
Mhm.
doing it right? Which can be seen as being like, oh, like a snowflake or being uncertain. But
Mhm.
really, it's just like, no, yeah, I don't want to hurt people's feelings. Yeah, I do want to make,
Totally.
okay. So you grew up in Boston, you grew up in yeah, kind of a melting pot,
Mhm.
thriving kind of culture and stuff. And did you go to university in America or
I
was that,
did.
yeah.
Yeah, I went to school in Atlanta, which was fun.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I've never been to Atlanta. And so you moved to Korea after that, did you say?
Yes, I did.
And was that for work or what was that? What was
It
that?
was. I was teaching English in Korea. I had
Nice.
been really involved in the ESL program at my university. I tutored many of the international students. I took an English teaching course. I was an English major, so it made sense, and I really loved making all these sort of cross-cultural communications and learning about other people's languages and how that impacted their writing in English. So it was a very natural step, I think, for me to just take the chance to travel because there's a lot of very good, very well established English teaching programs
Yeah.
for Americans or people from Canada,
Mm.
America, the UK, and such to teach in Asian countries. And so I thought, now's the time. So it was a very rewarding time.
Nice. And so, well, so going back a bit, sorry, when you were younger, were
Mhm.
you always interested in English and writing? Was that something that you have always kind of been passionate about?
Definitely. I was always, writing lopsided on sheets of printer paper, like writing out my stories. I was lucky to have a lot of teachers in elementary school who were very, very open to having students learn things in out of the box ways. Like we
Yeah.
had a lot of, we put on plays where we would make all the costumes and things while the students in some other classes in the same school had to take tests and things
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
So I grew up
Nice.
being encouraged to be very creative at a very young age. And then I leaned into that more as I got older. I definitely didn't think it could be a career when
Yeah, yeah.
I was younger, but it's something I've always loved for sure. I've always loved writing.
But you had encouragement to
Yes.
pursue it in not
Yes.
in a necessarily a serious way of like be a professional writer, but it was you were getting validation that you were good at it.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm sure that was very helpful. Not just in school from my teachers, but also from my parents, which I know
Mm,
is a big deal, especially in a lot of Asian American families. There's a lot of value placed on more prestigious careers like being
mm.
a doctor or a lawyer or going into business. I never felt that pressure from my parents. They were always happy to let me do whatever I wanted, and they always helped me to succeed at whatever it was. Like when I was really interested in writing as a child, my mom sent me to all these like writing workshops and
Amazing.
camps and things like that. So my
Mm.
parents have always been very supportive. Though my mom, who is the Asian parent, has a degree in flute performance, so she really didn't have any moral high ground to stand
No.
on in terms of demanding that I be a lawyer or something like that.
Oh, that's so true. I'm sure it doesn't stop some people though. But
Yeah, yeah.
were you writing things which were strange when you were younger? Were you following basically? I guess like some writers, they start by doing like I guess the equivalent of fan fiction, or they're like
Mhm.
building off their own stuff. Were you writing things that were quite original and surprising when you were younger?
Um, I definitely had my fan fiction moment.
Yeah,
I
fair
was
enough.
really into Full Metal Alchemist
Oh
at the
yeah,
time. That
yeah.
was my obsession as a child. I never posted this anywhere, so you won't find it no matter how hard you look. Fortunately, I had that kind of foresight. But yeah, that was definitely part of it. Though I'd say most of the things I wrote were original, definitely leaning more into fantasy. I actually didn't start writing horror until after my debut fantasy novel came out, just because I didn't know how to scare people.
Yeah, yeah,
At
yeah,
least I thought I didn't know how to scare people.
yeah,
And then
yeah.
I accidentally scared a lot of people with my very dark fantasy writing, and I thought, what if I tried to scare people?
Totally. And I mean, horror is essentially fantasy in just a different form, isn't it? It's like,
Yeah.
I mean, it's maybe more rooted in the real world, but it's like it's relying on very similar tropes to fantasy in a lot of ways. Did you like horror before you started writing it? Did you watch horror movies and stuff?
Oh, absolutely. I was such a morbid child
Yeah.
growing up. I
Yeah.
still am. I think part of it is my dad's influence. We watched a lot of horror movies together, and that was
Yeah.
one of the ways we like to bond because my mom didn't want to watch any of those with us. So I was watching horror movies at probably way too young of an
Yeah.
age. I was reading Stephen King books from the library, which is, the story of every author ever.
Yeah.
Just reading Stephen King at like 9 years old and being forever scarred, altering your brain chemistry. So yeah, I was so into horror. It's what made me love reading in the first
Yeah.
place. I would just get all of those like mass market paperback horror books from the
Yeah.
library and just read so many of them that I would hardly even remember them afterwards. I honestly couldn't tell you a
Yeah.
lot of
Yeah.
those books that I read as a child. But that was always something that was very interesting to me. I think I was also just very cynical as a
Yeah.
child, even though I had no reason to be. I think a lot of the John Green quote that I think actually his brother Hank Green used in a book, which was, "I had a happy childhood, but I was not a happy child," which is kind of how I think of my cynicism back then. I was like, I don't want to read happy, cute, romantic stories. The real world is so much darker than that, even though I had no reason to feel that way whatsoever.
Yeah, and were you thinking about like death? Like what were you thinking about? Do you think that made you, yeah, that kind of, because I mean there is no right answer, because I think some people are just born with a curiosity for darkness, or whatever word you want to
Yeah,
use.
I mean, that's probably part of it. You know, I grew up living across from a cemetery, so, and I
Oh,
would like just go for walks, and like my mom would be pushing my stroller through the cemetery. So I think part of it is that that was very normalized to me. And I think part of it is also what I was saying before about growing up with teachers who are very out of the box.
yeah.
I sort of grew up, you know, as a lot of teenagers do, wanting to define yourself in opposition to things rather than
Mm,
align yourself with things.
yeah.
And so I think I just wanted to be this very cynical, not like other girls, edgy kind of
Yeah,
thing. And
yeah.
then it just got so baked into my
Yeah,
personality
yeah.
that I can no longer remove it. I have since absorbed it. It is now part of me.
Were you like an alt kid? Were you an alternative person?
I like to say I had my emo phase
Yeah.
for sure. Like I was hugely into My Chemical Romance, had
Yeah.
way too much eyeliner on. Luckily, no photos exist from that time. It was a little bit pre-Facebook,
Yeah, yeah.
so
Yeah.
there's very little evidence. But yeah, I had an emo phase.
Yeah, yeah. So I think most I mean you could probably broadly say that most people who enjoy horror and adjacent stuff have gone through that. And I think
Probably.
ultimately it is that thing if you described of like seeing the way that reality is often presented and then kind of having just this sense or an instinct that it's a nice story
Mhm.
that can be told, but it's actually maybe covering up important things. Like, I mean, myself, I found myself drawn to horror because I think I just had a kind of unease, a
Mhm.
general, and maybe that was influences from the fact that maybe my home life was tense at times and stuff like normal stuff. But it
Mhm.
just found myself kind of finding weirdly that those like the horror escape and stuff like that, or fantasy as well, dark fantasy, not everyone thinks of horror as like an escape, right?
Mhm.
You know what I mean? It's like
Definitely.
actually that's like an uncomfortable place. I'd rather
Mhm.
have the rom com. I'd rather have like the nice. So I guess are you kind of saying a similar thing that there was something almost like kind of comforting about being in that space of like reading Stephen King? Did you find that soothing at all?
I mean, I definitely felt very distant from a lot of the horror. Like I suppose I felt that it was far enough away from my emotions that it could be enjoyable regardless of what I
Okay, yeah,
was going through. Like, kind of like, I don't know, jump scares for me have always been sort of akin to riding a roller coaster, like
yeah,
that kind of fun excitement. It's never horror, at least as a child, wasn't something I ever took too seriously. I knew if I put on a horror movie, I would get to see an exciting story that wouldn't feel very personal to me. And I
okay,
think
yeah.
that's kind of what I preferred at
Yes.
the time.
No, I see that. So it wasn't like you weren't like give me dread and like
No.
existential kind of like I want to have my mind like blown. It was like it's like for fun and
Yeah.
that's but that I
Yeah.
presume that's your route into it. But I'm
Hmm.
assuming that as you have, being a writer,
Hmm.
obviously you are examining the human condition.
Hmm.
You're obviously trying to entertain, but you're trying to connect with people. So when you started writing in a kind of a serious way, like intentionally, did that start around university or before that? Like when about did that happen?
Yeah, definitely around like my sophomore, junior year of college when I had that moment that I think everyone has, which is what am I doing with my life? I think at the time I was a Spanish and Chinese major. I had this dream of being a UN interpreter, which is just the worst fit for me for a lot of reasons. I don't do well under that kind of stress, first of all.
Oh,
So I thought, okay, I can keep one practical major, which is Spanish, and I will do one thing that just really speaks to me and to my heart. And then I switched my Chinese major to a creative writing major. And my senior thesis as a creative writing major was a novel. And so that was the first novel I'd written as an adult. And I knew that if I made it my thesis, I would definitely finish it because it was a class and I was getting graded on it.
yeah,
So I
yeah,
had no choice
yeah, yeah, yeah.
but to do it. So I think that was when I first started taking it seriously, taking my writing seriously.
And did you? At what point did you? Because obviously, yes, okay. So you kind of it's great for writers, I think, to have like a goal and like a cutoff, and like you need to do it. Because
Mhm.
I think with a lot of people who enjoy writing, the problem is finishing things.
Mhm.
And so, How did you manage to kind of after that experience? Did that give you, because did you enjoy it? Were you like, oh, I could do this again, and I want to do it again, and I want to do it again and again as much as possible.
Definitely. I do find most of the process enjoyable, which I have learned is not the case for many writers,
Yeah, yeah.
which blows my mind. I mean, that's not to say I'm sitting here, having fun every moment of every day that I'm writing, especially now that it is my full-time job. It is stressful at times, but
Mm,
I find every part of the process so rewarding. I just have so many ideas all the
mm,
time. I have ADHD in case that
yeah.
wasn't very clear, that I just really need to get
Yeah.
onto paper and explore somewhere other than my own mind so I don't just drown in there. So I definitely really enjoyed the process and really wanted to continue doing it for as long as I could.
So with ADHD, I mean, you did just say like drowning in your own mind. Is that like is that what it feels like for you? Is it like it's great to escape out of this place where there is a lot of stuff going on in my head?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's fun to focus on one particular story at a time. I mean, the way I describe the way my mind feels most of the time is just like 10,000 Chrome tabs open all at once, and just like
That's
the
a
fan
great.
on the computer is whirring so loudly because it can't handle it.
That's so good.
So I think writing at times makes that worse depending on what I'm doing.
Mm.
But at other times it's helpful in terms of, just focusing in on one particular storyline.
Yeah, totally. That's nice. And yeah, but I think in general, a kind of it's a good way to harness all of, I would probably describe ADHD as being something that not in all people, but it can be used
Mhm.
in a way that is very powerful. It's like the mind is incredibly productive. And obviously some people need medication, of course they do. But there are so many creativity often attracts ADHD people and people on the spectrum, whatever, because
For
it
sure.
kind of allows you to externalize or channel and escape those things. So it's like you were writing, and maybe at what point then did you kind of, be intentional about I'm writing a manuscript, I'm going to send it off to an agent or whatever it is you thought was the right thing to do? Like when did you do that?
My senior year of college, when I was writing this book, I definitely intended to take it as far as I could, because in class, luckily, they talked a bit about the actual publishing process
Mm,
and how you would go about getting an agent. So I knew that once I finished this manuscript, I would start querying literary agents.
mm,
But I also knew that that was not going to happen very quickly.
no.
So meanwhile, I moved to Korea, and I was just getting up at 5 in the morning to like write my next book while I was waiting to hear back from agents about the book I had just sent out. And so a lot of my time in Korea was actually defined by me turning down a lot of social opportunities just so I could like sit in my apartment
Mm,
and write my book, because that was what I wanted more than anything at the time. And I didn't know what else to do. Like a lot of people tell me, "Oh, it's so cool that you have the motivation to
mm,
write all these books." But for me, it's just there's nothing else I really can or want to do. I mean, that's an
yeah.
exaggeration. I have worked actual jobs, but
No,
I'm
no,
not
no, but
consider.
I understand. Yeah, no, I understand.
But like for me, it's like putting my mind to anything else 40 hours a week or more is almost intolerable. Like this is
Mm,
just what I love, and I'm not good at forcing myself to do things that I don't
mm,
like, which I know is an extremely privileged thing to say. And of course, there are many things I have to do that I don't like.
yeah.
But I've never been someone who can sort of work a job and then leave that job at work and then go home and live the rest of my life. Like I
Mm,
need to be doing what I love, and I think it's a huge disadvantage and character flaw that I don't have the discipline to do anything else.
yeah.
But I just, I've written so much because it just feels like it's not a choice for me.
Yeah, no, and I completely understand. So, if you were working at a job, would you feel like resentful towards the job that you weren't able to do the thing that you wanted to do? Is it like if you were doing something, you'd be like, I can't wait to get back home to
A
just,
little bit,
yeah.
yeah, and a little bit like so I worked in libraries for a while after this, and as enjoyable as my career in that field was, I often felt like it was, for lack of a better phrase, like sort of a waste of my skills, just because I felt like I could be good at working the circulation desk at a library. I could
Yeah.
do well working in law school archives, but I felt like many people could do just as
Yeah.
well, if not better than me, whereas there are books that only I can write. And this is not like I am a better writer than everyone
No,
else.
no, no,
That's
I
not
get
what I
it.
mean.
I get it.
Just, we all have unique perspectives.
Yes,
Um,
no, I get
yeah.
that. And I think, especially for someone who has that it's almost like you've got it. It's an innate thing. Like you
Mhm.
haven't manufactured that like
Mhm.
drive and that desire. And of course, then when you're doing something which may seem, tricky to get the hang of it at first, like working in a library, whatever, eventually it's going to feel like 20% of your brain is just going
Yeah.
to. And I always found that about working in office jobs where I just didn't understand why I had to stay after I'd finished my work. It's like I'd get my work done, and then
Yeah.
I was like, I must be able to go now because I've done the
Right?
thing. And but like with writing, and because it's so you're producing it yourself, you control so much of the process. It's like how much do you want to get done? It's very freeing as
Yes,
well.
which is good and bad.
It is good and bad, but do
Yeah.
you do you do you identify with that sense of like freedom as well? Is that what you crave? Do you want to be your own person?
Definitely. I mean, I definitely appreciate having more flexibility. That being said, I feel like the way I structure my days is not that dissimilar from a 9 to 5.
No, but yeah,
But I like being able to choose my own projects, and I'm definitely very grateful for all the flexibility
yeah.
I have as a result of that, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so did you manage to get any responses from this first manuscript that you did?
I did. That's actually how I signed with my literary agent, who is still my agent today. That
Wow.
particular book did not sell. That one died on sub. But the next one I wrote, with her help, did sell, and that was my debut novel, The Keeper of Night. So I got very lucky finding her
Mm,
when I did, because I really didn't research literary agents as much as I probably should have. And so in a different timeline, I definitely could have signed with an agent who would not have been great for my career, but I just
mm.
got very lucky with my
Yeah,
agent.
yeah, because I guess that is slightly unusual, maybe to have a book of the debut book not work, and then for them to maybe stick it out with you.
Yeah, it depends on the agent. There are some that are very sharky that for sure, if you don't sell your first one, they're like, this is not a good
Mm,
investment. But luckily, Mary, my agent, is very much a career partner. She really, and
amazing.
I'll always be grateful for this. She liked my writing and really saw a lot of potential there. And now, we've been on this journey together for
Mm,
years, and I've gotten so much better at writing than I was back
mm.
then. So it's because of her. We've grown together because she had a very, long-term
It's amazing.
mindset.
And what about so the first thing you started writing, like well, the first thing you got published and it kind of went out and was a success was a fantasy
Mhm.
dark fantasy book, right?
Yes.
And what was that like writing for a community of people? Because the fantasy community they are very strong and they're big and
Yes.
they love it and they're nerds. I mean, in the way that I identify as well. Like, was that an enjoyable thing to explore for you?
Yes and no. I really wasn't very involved in any online book communities prior to that. So
Mm,
for me, it was a big change in terms of suddenly interacting with all these readers and writers, suddenly
mm.
learning of the existence of all these,
Yeah,
cliques and drama and what it's
yeah,
like to get tagged in reviews and stuff like that. So I don't want to say a lot of it is specific to the YA fantasy community as much as
no,
it is just the book community
mm,
in general. But that was definitely a big adjustment to start,
mm,
hearing people's opinions, not just on my work, but also to see how other authors, how other readers interacted with authors and vice versa, and how, situations can become kind of sticky. And then,
mm.
wow, I thought we were just here to write fun books. Actually, this is a huge, awful networking party sometimes. So
Yeah.
that was a surprise.
No, totally. And also, people identify incredibly strongly with these kind of things. I mean, it's probably always been the way in one form or another, but I feel like books, people can really bind their identity like music, like anything. It's like that it's part of who they are as a person, and it does mean a lot. And
Hmm.
I think sometimes it can be misinterpreted when people are passionately doing stuff online as being like, what is that? Is this really worth it? Like, why are you all getting so hyped up about this? Or
Hmm.
like, but it's actually, I think that if you look past some of the negativity and stuff, it is actually it's a really beautiful thing how people can be so passionate and celebrate kind of fiction and like your work as well. Like, did you though you said you maybe didn't enjoy certain elements of it, bad reviews? Did you get some of those?
Oh yes, I definitely got tagged in some very
Really?
bad reviews. Yeah.
What was that like
Uh,
to hear people say stuff?
um, so for me, the thing is, I don't take it personally at all when people criticize my writing. Like I've never been, and this is not to put down anyone else, but I do know like it's very common for a lot of writers to be genuinely very upset when someone's like, "Oh, the beginning of your book was so slow" or something like that.
Mm,
Stuff like that does not bother me at all. It never has.
mm,
What bothered me a lot with my first book was when people didn't criticize my writing, they criticized me. And that's because my first book is very much about learning how to live with biracial identity and like what
mm,
that means. And so it was, I the parts that upset me were not people who just didn't like the book for whatever reason. It was when people were saying like, I think this is bad representation of what it means to be
mm,
biracial. Like people who
mm.
aren't biracial would
Yeah, that's
say that I had represented my own identity wrong, like a lot. And
yeah,
that made me really frustrated. Or people being like, oh, this character is getting bullied for being biracial. That would never happen in real life. Again, people who are not biracial saying this,
yeah.
like that kind of stuff really got under my skin to the point where I was like, what is even the point of doing
Mm,
this anymore? Like I got very close to throwing in the towel.
really?
I'm glad I didn't. Yeah, I mean, I had this sort of breaking point where I saw this one I did not get tagged in, so I fully admit that this was my fault. I should not have looked at this. But I thought, how bad could it be? Because I got tagged in a positive review where someone was like, "Oh, I know this other creator hated the book, but I loved it." And
Yeah,
I was
so
like, "Oh, I wish you hadn't tagged me in this." But then I was like, "Well, now I'm just going to be thinking about it forever. There's no way it can be that bad." And I watched the other creator's video and I was like, "Oh, it is that bad." Actually,
really.
I was so mad about every single thing this creator said. Again, the things about biracial identity that they really had no right to speak on.
Mm,
And so at that point, it felt sort of like I had written this book with this purpose of sharing my experience, and
yeah.
it felt like so many people had read it and still just didn't understand at all what I was trying to say. And that was just so disheartening
Mm.
at the time. But, I had a two-book deal, so I had to keep
Yeah, yeah,
writing.
yeah. No, no, that
And,
that would have helped.
I'm glad. I care a lot less about that now. I definitely don't seek things out. Like, whenever I'm tempted, I just say, Kylie, do you want to ruin your day today? And if the answer is yes, then I will go watch it. But
But I
usually the
think that
answer is no.
subconsciously is probably what's going on. There's
Yeah,
part of
yeah.
you that some days you're just like, yeah, I want to hurt today.
Yeah, yeah.
Today is going
Some
to be
days.
that kind of day. But I've come across similar things, and actually, and maybe this is a generalization, but the fantasy community, when it comes to ethnicity,
Hmm.
there is some weird stuff going on because obviously there's a load of like fictional races
Hmm.
in
Yeah.
fantasy and stuff like that, and I think that people confuse, like, well, fantasy, there's high fantasy, and fantasy shouldn't be about the world. It should be, whatever it is. And I mean, I'm glad that you weren't dissuaded by it.
Thank you.
But obviously, I can imagine if you're going, this is my real experience, and I'm trying to communicate.
Hmm.
To have that picked on is a horrible thing. But there's people like that in every community, so
Oh,
it
definitely.
makes sense.
Yeah.
So, but in a way, I wouldn't say that it dissuaded you at all because it's a theme in your across your books in general. So
Yeah.
yeah, no, tell me
You know,
about that because I think it's a really identity for me is what reading and books and identifying with the other and other people, especially in horror, but in general is what it's about. So was that always something you were like, I want to communicate this, or is it just a natural thing?
yeah, I mean, definitely with my first duology, I felt like the book community in particular didn't acknowledge biracial identity in a way
Mm,
that other identities were being acknowledged at the time,
mm,
because this was at around the peak of the what is it? The Own Voices movement, which I know has since they no longer use that hashtag, but that's what it was at the time.
yeah.
And so I really felt like I had a lot to say about my identity that I really felt like was not being widely talked about. This is not
Yeah.
to say that I wrote the first ever book
No, no,
about
no.
biracial identity. That's
But
not
you're
what I
right.
mean, but it
You're
was
right though. Yeah.
definitely not as discussed
Mm,
as other identities. And so I really did want to talk about that. And then after my experiences with that book, I thought, okay, I'm gonna pull it back a little. Though what I found was I can't really escape it anymore. And maybe
ah,
part of it is just because of my debut novel. But for instance, my second duology, the Scarlet Alchemist duology, is about a character who is biracial, but her arc is not about her identity. Her arc is about, saving ancient China. So she's just a character who happens to be biracial as
yeah.
opposed to a book is about being biracial. And that I think was a very fun experience. And then I started to pull back even more. And my adult horror, Bat Eater and Other Names for Cora Zeng, the main character is biracial, but it's really not something she thinks about very much. It's more her identity as a Chinese American that's a bigger issue for her. And yet I
Mm.
still found when my agent and I sent this book out to editors, some of the responses we got were, "Wow, this is such an interesting book about biracial identity." And I was kind of like, "Is it? Is this just how I will be forever now?" Which there are worse things.
But do you think that's like a something that, because obviously as a writer, you can't know how it's all coming across. Do you
Yeah.
think that's something that maybe you can't help talking about, or do you think that that's something that other people are just seeing you and they are reading, they are putting that on your work? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think a little bit of both. I mean, because I am biracial and I'm writing books that take place in the real world, I know that the fact that you are biracial is relevant in a lot of situations and changes the way that people interact with you. So,
Mm.
if you're in the real world, it's going to come up, even if that's not an important part of the plot. But I think some people maybe read more into that than I intended. They're like, "Oh, she's making some big statement about being biracial here," and I'm just like, "No, this is just how this situation would play out if you
Mm.
look the way I do."
Yeah.
Basically. So I feel like as much as I try to sort of reel
Mm.
it in and lean back a little bit, as long as I am writing about biracial characters, I think it will always be there in some small part. Though I will say my next horror novel, Japanese Gothic, is actually the first book I've written where there is not a biracial main character. And it doesn't feel like a big deal to me. I mean, for
Mm.
this story, it just didn't make sense for the story that I wanted to tell. And I mean, you don't always have to justify the race of a character. Like
Yeah.
biracial people exist for like in all sorts of scenarios, all throughout history for all sorts of reasons. But like for this particular story, it would have presented a lot of logistical problems because this does also take place in the real world. And I just thought, it's not important to the story. And
Yeah.
so that's what
Oh,
I
of
wanted to
course.
write this
No,
time. So
and
I'm
you and
curious how this will work.
no, totally. And I wasn't asking you to justify,
Oh no, no, not at
like,
all. I
no, no,
just
no,
I have had thoughts on it too
no,
because for
no,
a while my brand has been like I write books about biracial girls, and so
no.
for this one it was an interesting change for
Yeah,
me
no,
that
I think all of it says more about the world than it does about you. You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
I think it's great though, as much as like, you might not necessarily want it to be highlighted, or like that's your brand.
Hmm.
But it is a great thing as well, because I think it's like my wife is biracial. She's half
Hmm.
Chinese, half German. And it's like, I know, I understand. I will never understand fully what it's like, but I understand the need to talk about like the intersectionality and all of it. And I think
Hmm.
there's so many interesting things to explore. But your writing, in terms of, bringing it back to like horror, like
Hmm.
what was it about maybe kind of inserting this kind of, let's say it wasn't specifically your identity, but writing about stuff that maybe is you can relate to, but placing it within the world of horror. So
Hmm.
what is it that makes you want to write within horror?
I have always felt that horror is just such a fantastic vehicle when we want to talk about injustice, because horror, in my opinion, at least the horror that I like, is all about catharsis.
Mm.
And I mean, you can make that argument for every genre to a certain degree, but I think in horror, it's extremely important and extremely prevalent. Like it has always been about monsters, our societal fears, and who we perceive as monsters. Ever since the beginning, that's all that horror has been
Yeah.
about. And so I think it's so powerful and so satisfying when characters are put into situations where they're forced to confront these
Yeah.
monsters. And I think for a book about hate crimes, which is, I mean, talk about societal injustice.
Yeah.
I think it was the right genre for me for this project.
Yes, definitely. I know, I agree. And I think that it's a great vehicle for positive anger as well. Like,
Totally, yes.
like it's obviously there can be books which are just nihilistic and,
Yeah.
almost pointless, but that's the point.
Hmm.
It's like I find the books that touch me the most in horror, and I basically only read horror, are the ones that give my anger, which I can't quite express, the voice.
Mhm.
Like, have you experienced that in terms of like your readers kind of letting you know that they kind of have been able to process stuff through your writing?
In terms of horror, interestingly enough, the majority of reviews I get tagged in for Bat Eater are by people who haven't had personal experience with racism against Asian people because they're not Asian, which I think is just the nature of, of the American readership. I don't think
Yeah.
that necessarily says anything. Then, Asian people saying, wow, this feels so validating for me personally. And there is some of that, but I think just because of, American readership, that's skewed a bit. So
Yeah.
because this is kind of a specific, a very specific group,
Yeah, yeah, of
I
course.
haven't seen as many people relating personally to it, though I've been so heartened and so encouraged by how many people were still happy to learn about it. Because that's all I wanted
But
for
that
my first book too, is just people who were happy to listen.
no,
And so
totally.
it makes me I feel very happy knowing that people were open to this.
One of the things I like, and without fetishizing diversity too
Mhm.
much, is I like as a white man to
Mhm.
read books from other perspectives. In fact,
Mhm.
and that's why I'm so glad that I think, even though you're definitely right, that it's quite a homogenous group of people who read horror, especially in America. It's good to have people reading books from other points of views. And what's good about horror is if the story's good and the
Mhm.
tropes are identifiable, you know what I mean? It's like
Totally.
obviously your books do subvert tropes, but like ultimately anyone can pick it up and identify it as like, I know where I am and I feel safe in this. And then you can kind of slip in, and it doesn't even have to be intentionally, but just these alternative kind of ways of seeing the world. And I think the trickle down effect is almost impossible to understand how it affects people's perceptions, especially if someone's
Mhm.
white and they're reading a book that's about someone who isn't white. So
Mhm.
I guess, but maybe would you like to have more people read it from a diverse, more diverse background?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That would be wonderful. And you're right. I think horror is very far behind
Mm,
other categories in terms of diversity, though Bat Eater was even possible, why it could even be published, because we have authors like Stephen Graham Jones and Sylvia Moreno Garcia,
yeah.
writing more diverse, very popular horror. And I just think people are learning that
Mm,
you can talk about politics and racism very explicitly and still have a really fun, enjoyable horror story. Like these things don't need to be
definitely.
mutually exclusive. Horror, uh, it has never been about pure apolitical escapism, as much as I
No,
think some people like to pretend
no, no, no.
it can be. And so I think now, even though we're calling more things out, I think people are starting to see that, it can still be fun horror like you've always known. And so it would be great if more people, I think, feel
Yeah,
welcomed into the horror community, because I think part of
yeah.
it is that many minorities have not been treated super well in the horror genre historically.
No,
So that's why
as
we have all these.
characters, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly,
yeah, yeah.
exactly. So hopefully that as that begins to change, the horror community will grow and diversify.
It's what's crazy about it is that for me, horror has always been the place for the other to explore,
Hmm.
and so it makes sense to me that marginalized voices would be, should be more. Not, it's not like I'm saying they have to be central, but it's like that's a natural place
No,
because you're
absolutely.
talking about disenfranchisement and you're talking about, like I said, anger at the world and fear
Hmm.
of other people. And I spoke to Andrew Joseph White recently, and he said this thing of like he doesn't like writing books where there's a character who's going, look at that scary thing over there. He
Hmm.
likes
Hmm.
writing books on reading books where normal people are going to the character, look at that scary thing, which I
Oh,
is kind of like, which I think also I identified with it just because I was like, well, yeah, I think that's true because there is something, whether you are visibly, you can be visibly differentiated from other people, or inside you feel
hmm.
like
Hmm.
a freak or whatever it is. It's like something to identify with. And besides your ethnicity, like in terms of yourself, like
Hmm.
do you do you feel alone ever? Do you have those feelings of otherness just as a, as a person, as a human?
Yeah, I mean, I think all of us do at
Yeah.
one point or another. I think in particular, one way that definitely came out in my writing is the main character of Bat Eater has very severe OCD,
Yeah.
and that was sort of exacerbated by the pandemic, which was I framed the story that way because it had so much to do with my own experience. And when I
Mm.
started writing about COVID, I didn't know how to write authentically about that time in any other way. Just because
Yeah.
I don't know how normal people
Mm.
experienced that time.
Yeah.
So I think that that's another way in which I definitely felt a bit othered and wanted to express it through fiction, which I think a lot of people appreciate it. Actually, I probably have more readers with OCD write to
Mm.
me and tell me like, "Oh, I loved this. I felt so validated,"
Yeah.
more than Asian readers. I don't know what that says about the horror community.
I don't think of like neurotypicality when I think
Mhm.
about the horror community. Most of the people I meet fall somewhere on the spectrum, and I'm not saying I'm identifying and pointing people out, and they're
No, no.
telling me. You can just kind of tell, and which is a great thing because we're all on the spectrum, and it's not.
Mhm.
It's just I think people maybe who are more curious and maybe have been drawn to identify themselves as on the spectrum come to horror, for the
Mhm.
same kind of reasons we are talking about before. So do you have OCD?
I do, yes.
How do you manage it? Is it difficult for you, or have you found ways to kind of?
These days it's not difficult at all, really. In
Yeah.
the past, it was very difficult. And actually, at the time when I wrote Bat Eater, I was not diagnosed. And so you'll notice that I never actually use the
Mm,
phrase OCD in the book. And
yeah.
that's because, like, that was just how I felt at the time. I didn't have a
Mm,
formal diagnosis, so I didn't want to call it that.
mm.
And then a lot of my agent and my beta readers were all like, "Wow, this character with OCD is so interesting." And I was like, "Wait,
Did you
wait, but that's just what I think."
did you ever consider it?
Oh, no, I mean, I suspected, but
Yeah.
for a lot of reasons, it's kind of difficult to
Mm,
get a formal
of course.
diagnosis.
Yeah.
I think no matter where you are.
Yeah.
Though since then, that's something I have put a lot of time and unfortunately a lot of money into
I mean,
working on. And thankfully, I don't identify so much with Cora
yeah, yeah, yeah.
anymore. So that's
But
good. But parts of it are always there.
well, I think what's so cool about the concept of the book is actually whether you have OCD or not, we all experienced a sensation maybe of what having OCD might be like because we were all terrified of, the other coming into our homes,
Hmm.
like trying to keep ourselves safe and
Hmm. Totally.
confined. And there was a lot of ritual involved in, during COVID. So I think that's one of the great things about the book is that it's not like you don't have to read it and go, oh, that character's got OCD. In a way, it's just like it was just a heightened manifestation of a fear that we all had. Oh, that's how I read it.
No, yeah, exactly. And that's the thing is why I think that's actually quite a relatable disorder for a lot of people
Yeah,
because the root is in thoughts that we all have. We
yeah,
all have intrusive thoughts. The only
yeah.
difference is with OCD, you can't let
Stop
them
them.
go for
Yeah,
whatever
yeah,
reason.
yeah, yeah. No, and that is brutal. And I think in the past, I remember when OCD was it was kind of one of those things, a bit like ADHD, in fact,
Mhm.
where people you'd say it and it's like it's not that serious, or it kind of it was like a light version of something,
Mhm.
but actually, like an intrusive thought, a repetitive intrusive thought, is horrendous. I mean,
Mhm.
that's like being in prison, like and in a most terrifying place ever. Like, so I think it's so good, and I would definitely attribute people writing about it, people talking about it, whether explicitly or not, but just sharing these kind of things, which has helped normalize all this stuff. And I would say that you definitely have contributed to it because
Oh, thank
let's
you.
be honest, Bat Eater is big, very successful
Oh,
book.
thank you.
No, it is. I mean, everyone. It's kind of like it's in the canon now. It's modern.
Oh, that's so
No,
nice. Oh,
no,
thank
it
you. That makes
is.
me so happy.
No, it is though. It's very identifiable, even down to the cover art. It's very, you kind of know it as soon as you can see it. You could see a picture of it that big and you'd know what it was. Tell me about your last book as well.
Are you talking about my timeline book? Or is
Yes,
that
yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
okay. I was
yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
totally
Sorry,
totally
sorry,
different
yeah, yeah,
genre here. No,
yeah.
I just wasn't sure because that's like so not horror. So I
No, no,
was
no.
like,
But
oh,
I
sorry.
want to know about it. I want to know about it all.
Yeah, it's called I'll Find You Where the Timeline Ends. It's a young adult contemporary fantasy about time travel. It takes place in Seoul, and it's a very cute time travel romantasy. And in editor actually described it as cute, which was a first for any of my books. More often, like in trade reviews, they say this is gruesome and dark. So I had a lot of fun totally switching gears
Yeah,
because a lot of people describe me as like Enid and Wednesday at the same time, or like Miss Frizzle and Geralt of Rivia, like not in between, but just both at
yeah,
the
yeah,
same
yeah,
time.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I feel like I'll Find You Where the Timeline Ends is like my cute, happy, silly side of my
yeah.
personality, and then everything I've written up until then is just the darkness inside me. So it was fun to get to lean into it because, even in my really dark books, there are some extremely silly moments. And so it was very fun to lean into those a lot more for an
Yeah.
entire book.
Well, that's why I wanted to ask you is because I think it's like it's nice. You've obviously, there's more, there's plurality. It's not just duality in all of us, and it's like it's. I think sometimes it's like, well, horror authors they write horror,
Mhm.
but that's not true of all horror authors. You have
Mhm.
other sides to you, and you want to kind of express that as well, right?
Yeah.
Like it wouldn't be authentic to you to just write horror for the rest of your life.
I mean, I love horror.
Yeah.
So I think I would be happy if I could only write horror for the rest of my life. But at the moment I do have different ideas that I
Mm.
want to explore. And I think a big part of it is that, I started my writing journey relatively young in the grand scheme of things. Like I started writing dark fantasy when I was like 18.
Mm.
And I think I first got published I was like 25,
Yeah.
26, and I'm just so much less cynical now
Mm.
than I was then. I think back then I felt like the darkness was my identity. I want to be like Billie Eilish with the spiders crawling
Yeah.
over her
Yeah.
face.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. Yeah.
this is who I am. And now I just don't feel
Yeah.
quite so strongly attached to that identity
Mm.
as much as I still love horror, if not more than I
Mm.
did before. I don't feel like that's all there is to me
No,
anymore.
and that's a no, but that's a great thing. That's almost like a kind of you have to achieve that. I think that comes from knowing yourself really, because it's
Hmm.
like it's very attractive, isn't it, to kind of attach yourself to an identity and to be
Totally.
like, this is my I am defined. We
Yeah.
all want to be defined, but actually, really, we're not. You can't really
Yeah,
define.
we're complex.
We're very complex. Last question, which is
Mhm.
slightly bleak question, but
Okay.
what are you scared of right now?
Sorry, just so I'm trying to think, do I answer this on like the level of like spiders or like the end of the world?
However you want to go, how big you want. I mean, yes, whatever you're feeling. Okay, what is concerning you or troubling you right now? Like,
The state of the world is quite concerning to me
yeah,
at the moment. I would like to believe that we will not enter a world war and that NATO will not dissolve. Those are probably top of my list right now, or that we won't live in a police state under martial law anytime soon.
I know.
Yeah, there's
Does-
that. Also, I saw a very large bug outside my office, so that's also concerning me in a much different way.
yeah, yeah. But I mean, I think, but does this kind of stuff? Do you find it, do you work out your fears by writing? Like, do you find yourself, maybe it's not a conscious thing, but do you realize afterwards, oh, I was going through something there and I was using what I was scared of to write?
Probably. In some ways, yes. Like if for Bat Eater, definitely yes.
Mm.
Obviously that was working out a lot of my thoughts on
Yeah, yeah,
current events and the
yeah,
pandemic and
yeah,
whatnot. Though for some of my books, not as much. I feel it's like especially now that I'm writing like my eighth book or something like that. I
wow.
feel like I'm trying to be different with every book. Like I'm not always pulling from, the depths of my soul in terms of, like I feel like I've said a lot of what I have to say in terms of my
Yeah.
personal beliefs. Like I've written my Eat the Rich we hate
Mhm.
capitalism duology. I've written about biracial identity.
Yeah.
I've written about racism against Asian people. And I don't want to always write about those things. So
Yeah.
now it's very different. Like when I'm thinking about Japanese Gothic,
Mm.
I don't know if any of the central conflicts in that book are anything that are really personal to
Mm.
me in
Yeah.
an obvious way. Like it's about, very difficult relationships with fathers,
Yeah.
and meeting expectations that are unreasonable with your parents. And that's not something I personally identify a whole lot with. It's just something I wanted to write about.
Yeah.
So I think it varies. And I like to think that as I continue writing, I can, I mean, I think my soul is always going to be in my books in some way, but
Yeah.
I don't want to write 1,000 versions of Kylie Lee Baker. I want to explore very different characters and very different worlds, and just
Mm.
something that's different than what I've written before.
Totally, but I think that's kind of earned, over time. I think you probably all writers have to start from, that thing of like, write what you know.
Oh,
I think you
no,
start from there,
totally.
right?
I think everyone's first novel is usually like some sort of self-insert character to some degree. Like The Keeper of Night. I mean, not that I don't think I am the main character, but obviously she has a huge chunk of my identity. And I
Yeah,
think that's inevitable.
yeah,
But I think
definitely.
at some point you run out of trauma to
Yeah,
monetize.
that's what it is. Trauma to
Yeah.
monetize. I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, final question. Are you I presume you do quite a lot of blurbing and stuff.
Yes.
Have you blurbed anything recently that you enjoyed? Well,
Uh,
presumably you enjoyed it. Otherwise,
Yes, sorry, my stack of books that I have yet to blurb is looming at me from right over
well,
there.
it's
Most
forever, isn't it?
recently, I read a decomposition book by Sarah Vanos, which
Yeah.
is about a woman who finds a dead body in the yard of her house, and she befriends it as
Yes.
she's reading the journal of what happened to this person. I loved it. For
That
me,
sounds
that's like
great.
a prime example of like what horror should be. It
Yeah.
was so weird and so fun and
Yeah.
so sad.
Yeah.
It was wonderful. And also, Teddy Bears Never Die, which is it's translated from Korean. It's about a girl who works at a flop house and gets her life is saved by an axe wielding teddy bear. It's so bananas, but was a lot of fun and a very different. I was thinking about it in the context of my timeline book because obviously I never experienced that particular side of Korea. I was
Yeah.
not part of like the dark criminal underworld,
No.
fortunately. But not everything is, bright, flashy tourism
No.
and everything like that. So it was interesting to hear that perspective. So those are two books I've learned recently that were wonderful.
Well, brilliant. I look forward to both of those. And what I like about both of them is that you summed up the vibe in like a sentence, which probably makes you a good blurber as well.
I hope so.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for talking to me. It's
No,
been,
thank you. This was wonderful. Thank you so much for asking me.
oh, you're welcome. What are you doing for the rest of the day? You're getting back to writing.
I have a lot of reading to do. I'm like 6 books deep into books I promised to blurb, so I need to get to that.
Fair enough. There's worse things you could be doing with your time.
Yeah.
You could be in
Oh,
an
for sure,
office
for sure.
going on. Well, I have a really nice rest of your day.
Thank you. You too. It was so nice to meet you and to talk to you.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll when you're when is Japanese Gothic coming out, by the way?
April, actually, we just pushed the date back like a week or so. I want to say April 16th. Though actually in the UK, it might not have changed. Mid-April, more
Yeah,
or
yeah, great.
less.
No, it's definitely on my radar. But I really appreciate your time, and also just I'm a fan, so it's like
Oh, thank
on
you.
that level, it's also nice to be able to talk to you.
Oh, that's very nice. It was wonderful talking to you too. I love talking about horror.